This is your World War III update. The USA just sent a major warning to the Russians. Donald Trump, in his most recent histrionic online fit, has sent a message, an implicit message to Vladimir Putin, a reminder that the United States believes it has the capability to do a decapitation strike on the Kremlin. This, of course, is exemplified in this image of Putin and Trump looking up at an unexpected flyover of a B-2 bomber. Of course, it was expected for Trump. It was not expected for Vladimir Putin, all right? Clearly, this is foreshadowing a potential decapitation strike attempt on the Kremlin. Now, this is very concerning because in light of the timeline where we just seen the biggest military parade in history and the locking of arms of all of the quote-unquote axis of evil. And just yesterday, we seen a B-2 bomber go on some sort of mission. What was it, an exercise? Was it for misdirection? Was it an actual mission that was flown where they did a real sortie? We don't know. But we know that the B-2 bomber was on flight radar clearly as a signal. This is all about telegraphing, okay? Because, of course, all of the Russophiles are misinterpreting this widely. They're taking this as some sort of show of solidarity of the United States and Russia, when it's clearly a veiled threat that you can see from space. Okay, so now one could interpret it as being weak, contrasted with the more phlegmatic and stoic approach of Vladimir Putin versus the more obtrusive signaling of Donald Trump, which we've become accustomed to. Is it all just taco, or are we going to actually see a situation like Iran when they somewhat surprised many people and actually went through with the mission despite the risks that were associated with it? So are they about to attempt something is the question. Now today we have the rebranding of the Department of Defense, the Department of War. And this is one of those things that's very difficult to understand. On the surface, it looks like it's all about the revision of martial culture, which is in contradiction to the idea that if you're preparing for war, exhibit peace. I think that works, and of course you'd want to do that because you don't want to spook anybody. However, if you're trying to condition people and prime them for casualties and for war measures, then there might be something to this where, on the one hand, you're renaming, the Department of Defense, which is politically correct, euphemistic terminology that they're trying to, migrate over to, getting down to the brass taxes of things. There's an element there where you kind of want to assuage people's concerns. So you don't want to call attention to the prospect of war, but you also need to marshal forces to a certain extent. So this is why you have this contradictory behavior where you have Trump and Putin at this so-called peace conference. At the same time, they're rebranding everything, the Department of War, and everything that you're seeing on the ground unfold is, of course, all about the preparing for a major conflict around the world. This essentially screams higher DEFCON level. It's to marshal forces for a more war level of preparedness amidst the population. And of course, it's about signaling. So it's about deterrence, and the same thing here. So we could chalk this up to just being a puffing of feathers in response to, China putting on the biggest military parade ever. We're going to change the Department of Defense to the Department of War. We're going to unveil giant American flags that are supposed to be the size of the Empire State Building. That's actually what they're going to be investing in. And this is supposed to be some sort of deterrent, perhaps. But I think it's really to prime the population, to get them ready for what is coming down the road, and try to harness this patriotic sentiment and this sort of populist angst, harness it in the direction of militarizing, mobilizing for war while you have it. I've always suspected that if you're going to go into war, you need somebody like Trump to rally the troops, okay? And this is why he was the choice of the elites and the deep state, who he's 110% fully beholden to, no matter what any idiot on the internet says. That is clearly what is happening. They need somebody like that who people are going to feel comfortable following. Kamala is not going to be able to, she wouldn't have been able to marshal forces in the same way that Trump could. You need to now bring out those stronger elements of your society that can, of course, be leveraged for war. You don't want thinking people during wartime. In fact, you want people who are dumbed down, but in a way that can be corralled and maintained. So that is what's going on in that department. We're talking about troops today. NATO's getting ready to give Ukraine long-range missiles, according to the UK. So this is in the discourse once again. Of course, we've been hearing about this for a long time. Now Ukraine has the ability to churn out its own capabilities. The UK says a coalition of the willing will provide deep strike capability. Starmer welcome pledges. Macron cites future security guarantees, a post-peace deal. And Germany has mused about tourists. Russia alleges that covert tourist prep is already happening inside Ukraine with German operator involvement. Now, we also have this promise of security guarantees. Emmanuel Macron is saying that the U.S. support will be finalized in the coming days ahead. And some reports indicate that 25,000 to 30,000 personnel are planned, which of course would only be a tripwire force, right? Because this would never be sufficient to actually confront the Russians directly. Just checking my audio here, all looks good. I've been having some technical difficulties lately. So that's what's going on. They're going to put in a tripwire force, and they are really paranoid about what's going down. If you're Trump right now and you were actually serious about coming to some sort of peaceful terms with the Russians, you wouldn't be posting stuff like this, because of course this is going to be very antagonistic. The Russians have reiterated today, once again, from the man himself, Sergei Lavrov, that under no uncertain terms are they willing to allow NATO troops inside Ukraine. Doesn't matter what part of it it could possibly be, because of course their main aim is demilitarization, denazification, as obscure as that may be. What they really care about is demilitarization. They don't want Ukraine to militarize once again, because clearly the precedent has been set that if you attack the Russians and if you overstep our red lines, we're not going to do anything about it. So why would Ukraine, and NATO for that matter, ever hesitate, even if there was some peace deal struck, to not attack the Donbass once again, knowing full well that Russia is not going to do a damn thing about it outside the realm of what is conventionally acceptable. Ukraine is also expected to start rolling out some other new weapon systems, including the FP7, which is a ballistic missile, which has a range of 200 kilometers, as well as the FP9, which has a 900-kilometer range, which of course puts Moscow well within the crosshairs. Now, Russia's strategic aviation has had some issues as of late. Is this cyber-related? What's going on here? So basically, there were a few planes in as many days that succumbed to some difficulties. Of course, this is important in light of the fact that their aviational capabilities have been decimated by the spiderweb attacks, as well as just, the attrition of the war itself. A Tu-160 plane failed its launch to launch missiles. Another Tu-160 was struck by lightning and aborted. And a third aircraft at Engels couldn't take off. So causes are unknown. So is this ado with the lack of parts, and are the sanctions taking their toll on Russia's aviational industry? I would presume that after that engagement with the Chinese, there's now going to be a lot of suspicion as to what level of collusion there is between China and Russia from a military point of view. They have yet to openly disclose any sort of military defensive cooperation in terms of China shipping weapons to Russia. But for all we know, There's a lot of Chinese people working inside Russia. There could be parts, materiel that are being routed through other countries that are acting as intermediaries, so not to draw too much attention, because of course China has to walk this fine line where they balance their relations with the United States, knowing full well that a war there is coming, but if they can, they will postpone it. So it could be that that is what is going on. But something has certainly triggered Trump today, and it doesn't look good. Russian assets are being seized by the UK, who redirected 1.3 billion in Russian assets to aid. So this could be part of the reason why the price of gold is going up. You know, of course, there's all the talk about the Fed administration changing and all of that. Who knows what that is? Russian oil refineries continue to get lit up all across Russia. This one, I believe, was in Lugansk. And the Russian gasoline situation is actually pretty dire right now. And what's happening, and it just occurred to me today, this is probably something that should have been obvious, and it's something I had thought of before, but I never quite put two and two together, that the reason I suspect, and my theory as to why oil is dropping and why Russian gasoline prices are rising, is because, of course, Russia is still exporting crude oil. So they're still exporting the raw material. These refineries that are being struck this is how Russia is able to refine fuels, all the various fuels, petrochemicals, diesel, aviational fuel, things of that nature, rocket fuels, all of those things. So Ukraine is going for these soft targets, and as such, you have a situation where you're getting a oil glut in the Russian market because they can't refine it anymore as fast as they could. Something like 20 to 25% of Russia's refinement capability has now been taken offline, okay? So what that means is that more of that crude then is either sitting in reserve or potentially flooding the markets. Now, I'm kind of having an ongoing debate with somebody about this in terms of how significant this is, and from a finance perspective, does this theory even work? I personally think it does. A lot of the even mainstream news sources seem to think it does. There is a gasoline shortage inside Russia at this time that is largely due to these strikes. So this is why we're seeing the price of oil go down as these oil refineries get lit up. Now, it's important to understand that perhaps this is the arrangement between the Ukrainians and the Americans, in that we don't want the price of oil to spike too much to the benefit of the Russians. So we only want you to attack the oil refineries, which are mostly going to affect Russia domestically. Yes, they do export diesel. They export some of these other petrofuels, chemicals. But by and large, this is going to be a domestic problem because their crude is still going to either be in reserve or make its way to the market, which is going to have a net negative effect on the price of oil, because that means there's more oil on the market that is yet to be refined. I use the example of, let's say you had a lot of grain, but for some reason your flour mills were being destroyed. Well, would the price of grain go up in that instance, or would it go down? Obviously, it would probably go down because there would be this massive glut, and the bottleneck of refinement before you could make actual bread out of the flour is, of course, very akin to these refinement facilities. All right. So this is why we can see oil going down. Now, when oil really starts to get when the price of oil skyrockets, that's only going to happen if they start targeting the actual shadow fleet tankers themselves, the ports, and maybe even some of the mining facilities, the oil facilities, maybe some offshore rigs, things of that nature, the ones that are prime targets, of course, because typically a lot of these oil wells and derricks are distributed over large areas. So, in order for you to really make a dent, you would need a lot of drones in order to do that. They haven't been doing that yet because I think the arrangement with the United States is we're trying to destroy Russia financially by suppressing the price of oil. And if you go after those things, the price of oil is going to correspondingly rise. And we're trying to ride this out. We're trying to cripple Russia financially to make them come to heel, which it doesn't appear like they're going to do. Latvia is getting ready to conscript women by 2028. So cue the Starship Trooper co-ed showers. It's about to happen. We all got a little taste of that with Ukraine, right? Where they're, you get pregnant women, I don't know if that was a publicity stunt or what. And they're putting everybody out there, even people with Down syndrome, on the front line to be cannon fodder. So that's exactly what is going to happen here. You see, what they've learned in Ukraine is that if you deprive people of, when wartime comes, they're going to have to enact these war measures acts, which are naturally going to strip people of their civil rights and freedoms. So if you can approximate that a little bit beforehand, then it makes that bridge a little bit shorter to cross. What do I mean by that? Well, here's what's going on in Canada, okay? When I first heard this, I was like, what the hell? This guy's got Demolition Man, Police Chief aura, 100%, or maybe this guy, what is this guy? Not the probation, the guy who runs the jail, the warden in Shawshank Redemption. Corrupt, sanctimonious. Take a look at this guy right here, all right? I think this is like the Ontario police chief or something like that. I don't know if this guy is a moron or if he's just really this callous and indifferent towards people's well-being that he would actually say what he's about to say. Get a load of this. I can't believe they would say this with a straight face. I'm going to play you the Premier Rob Ford's, not response, but I'm going to give you his take, which surprisingly I actually agree with.
If you find yourself the victim of a home invasion, we are urging citizens not to take matters into their own hands. While we don't want homeowners to feel powerless, we urge you to call 911.
Yeah, your voice cracking all right, because you know what you're saying is bullshit.
911 and do everything you can to keep yourself and loved ones safe until police arrive, and be the best witness possible. This could mean locking yourself in a...
Even if you're dead, maybe we'll be able to scan your brain cells so we can get a report.
A room away from the perpetrators, hiding, fleeing the home, but don't engage unless absolutely necessary.
What does he mean by absolutely necessary? That is the thing, right? Like, you are, according to the law, if you feel that you're at risk of grievous bodily harm, you are able to defend yourself with any means necessary in Canada. It's not similar to the castle doctrine thing in the United States. You can't just start blasting people because they come through your door. There has to be a threat of grievous bodily harm. So in that situation, of course, using force to defend yourself or your family obviously is going to be the go-to reaction for anybody with half a brain. Let's listen to what else he has to say.
But as it stands, we know the best defense for most people is to comply, as you've just heard a number.
I mean, you couldn't make this up. The best defense for people is to comply. It really starts to come into clear vision, doesn't it? Exactly what they're setting us up for. Especially, as it's an uncanny parallel, not only in his physical appearance, but into the most prophetic movie of all time, Demolition Man, with this supercilious police chief, and how he patronizes and infantilizes people into believing that you do not have the capability as an individual who could have the means to defend themselves in a myriad of ways. It's not like guns are fully illegal in Canada yet. Yet you're supposed to wait for the police to get there while whatever happens just happens, and comply with an attacker. For all you know, he's going to try to sexually assault your kids or your wife or whatever the case. This is what they want people to believe. They want you to comply now. Why? Because you're going to be easier to manage when the shit hits the fan and it's World War III. So again, the more authoritarian they can make the laws, and they can acclimate people to more authoritarian laws, they know that when the War Measures Act is implemented for World War III, That's what's going to happen. So it's going to be easier. It's going to be a shorter distance if a lot of these things are in place beforehand, be it just psychologically for people, psychologically priming people to this reality, or otherwise.
Number of safety recommendations.
I mean, just take a look.
Call 911 and do everything.
Take a look at
you
the.
can to keep yourself and loved ones safe until police
talk
arrive.
about art imitating life or life imitating art. I mean, look at that. And he said, and you got to watch the movie because the cop is the exact same way. Oh, we just have to wait for another murder, death, kill to happen, and then we can find our criminal. And Simon Phoenix will be behind bars. I've watched this movie probably 50 times. I mean, it is far and away one of the most prophetic films based on Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Go and watch it again. It's scary. If it, it would be funny if it weren't so scary, if it weren't so true and happening. Here's what Rob Ford had to say. Now, I have to agree with this guy for once. I'm pretty sure he did this behind a group of melanated individuals for a reason. He's kind of using that as a bit of shield for, the predominantly liberal bend in Canada. I'm pretty sure that was a bit of the setup here, right? Which was smart.
Man got his doors kicked in the middle of the night. 4 people went in there. His 3 kids are there. His wife had a gun to one of the kids. He went to go protect them. And these scumbags shot him right in front of his kids. Shot him dead twice. Just imagine, what the trauma these kids are going to go through for the rest of their lives. This is where society's gone, folks. They're defending themselves now. If you have a gun, you're a hunter, and someone's coming into your house to kill your family, they're gonna defend their family, and they should be exempt. Go to root cause. It's not them coming into the house. It's ridiculous. You know something? I have a saying for the folks that are defending their homes.
This is a token liberal nightmare right here, right? You have a bunch of black guys behind Rob Ford cheering on for less gun control. That's exactly what they don't want to happen. Now, what they wanted to happen was some good old boys behind him clapping because they know, but Rob Ford, he's smart. He's good with the optics because he knows that the media can't twist this in that way. They still will twist it in the words, but notice the inconsistency with the police chief of all people and what the premier is saying. And quite frankly, I don't know if this guy is just an idiot or if he has nefarious intent. Maybe it's a combination of both of those things. But I can't believe he would say that with a straight face because he would not hold himself to the same account in that type of situation. He would absolutely use lethal force if you tried to home invade his home, okay? So that is how detached and apathetic these people are. At least maybe Rob Ford's just saying that. Maybe he's not going to do anything about it. I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath as to whether or not he's going to do something about it. Who knows? We're already, is he criticizing the gun control, the gun grab that's happening in Canada? I don't think so. He hasn't been very vocal about that. So I think he's just doing this because he realizes it's politically useful at this point.
Rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And unfortunately, my friend Aleem is going to be carried by 6 because he's trying to defend his family. It's a disaster right now.
No, I think he meant to say that, yeah, he if he did actually defend his family with a firearm, he might not be being judged by 12, which would be better than carried by 6. But anyways, you get the point, right? So here's Macron talking all about how, they're getting ready to put boots on the ground. And so this is the whole thing, right? Again, if they're going to implement war measures, then it's going to be a lot easier to do either if you call it the Department of War like they're doing in the United States, where they have to take a slightly different approach because they know there's never going to be compromise on things like the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. And but in Canada, you have to take a slightly different approach. You need to crank up the authoritarianism so that when you finally get to a situation where you need to impose widespread martial law, people will take to it relatively easy because they're already living in martial law, right? This is what Trump had to say yesterday. I don't know what the hell he's saying here. This almost seemed like a cartoon. This looked like it could have been cut out of the movie Idiocracy. Let's listen to this.
Because without the United States, everything in the world would die. It's true. It's so powerful. It's so big, and I made it really big in the first 4 years.
Oh man, like, could you imagine being the leaders of the world listening to this? Everything in the world would die. Now, what he probably should have said is that the U.S. Navy plays a critical role. Let me put my microphone back on here. The U.S. Navy plays a critical role in policing the primary maritime corridors that facilitate global trade. And thus, without us, there might be chaos in the high seas. If he would have said something like that, but to just go to the world would die, it's a bit of a stretch. It's very debatable. Not even going to go there. This is what he was posting. This is what the President of the United States was posting. I really think that it's about bread and circuses, you know? To think of the insult to the intelligence of his viewers, that they would think that this was the presidential thing to do. And not in the sense, you know, you got to be fake and contrived and deep state-like, just in the sense that you have the decorum in order to lead with your brain as opposed to your amygdala, which controls emotions. It's these, and there was just like a blitz of shit posts yesterday, like 10 of them, all kinds of weird memes and just this, you know, impromptu histrionic outburst by the sitting president, which was just weird. In between, and if you go look on the Truth Social page, it's just littered with ads. Like every single post, there's an ad between it, and it's for the dumbest stuff. You know? It's for exactly what you would think. You know, all the ads in the movie Idiocracy that were around the screen, those are the kind of ads you're gonna get thrown your way. I don't even think they're dialed into, you know, Google's kind of ad, you know, where they're trying to give you an ad that serves you, that's catered to you. It's just generic, really shitty ads. It's just weird. Now, I know YouTube litters these videos with ads. I don't even control where the ads go. They just put them in there. What I would strongly encourage people to do, if you don't like the ads, the best investment you'll ever make is YouTube Premium. It's $11.99 a month. It's the best, you know, and honestly, for the amount of money, for the amount of time that a lot of people spend on YouTube, it is probably going to be the best $12 you ever spend. You never have to sit through an ad. Just, you know, saving yourself sitting through an hour of ads. You know, there you go. You made your money back, you know. But you can do a lot of other things too. In Israel, I believe they're getting ready to expand their nuclear site. And this is interesting, you know, and just the hypocrisy of it all. Because, of course, they're coming down hard on the Iranians for building nuclear weapons when they're not party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have nuclear weapons, or claim to, or are claimed to by other intelligence agencies. They don't deny it. They're estimated to have about 80. And here they are expanding their nuclear program, all right? So, and this, of course, is in a colony. This entire land has been colonized in the last, when did they make that agreement? After World War II, you know, they needed a place to go. It actually started with the Balfour Declaration and all that. I'm not going to get into the politics of the place, but this is the situation that we're in. So the satellite imagery shows major new construction at Israel's Negev site. Thick concrete, underground levels, cranes, analysts speculate, reactor or warhead-related facility. Activity visible, significant changes since July 25th. All right, that's what's going on. Everybody's losing jobs. The job market ain't doing too good. Looks like we are on the brink of a possible recession. And what's the jobs revision? In 5 days, BLS may revise jobs down by up to less than 950,000 K, the largest drop since 2010 for the 12 months ending in March of 2025. Unemployed now exceed openings. So these kind of numbers at this point, it's so arbitrary as to where they want to draw the line. It's kind of like inflation, how inflation used to be measured versus how it's measured today. At the end of the day, you have to look at what is the state of the cities, what is the state of your bank account, your debt levels, your stress level, and that's how you're going to really know that you're in a recession, because we're living in a day and age where it's postmodernism abound. And what I mean by that is you're never going to get the truth, whether it's in war, casualty rates. Both sides claim that the other side has lost 1 million people. The government can say that inflation is going down or it's at 3%, when the reality is it feels more like 10%, and so on and so forth. And depending on how they, rate what a job is versus a part-time versus casual, and all these things. So this is why you have to trust your eyes, or that old saying, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see, because even your eyes can most certainly deceive you. Anyways, guys, I got to bounce here, and all I can say is that we are in September, and things are progressing exactly as I expected them to do in September. There's a big possibility that these Belarusian exercises, these nuclear exercises in the next couple weeks, could be a kickoff point for something. Let's hope it isn't. I want to give people a heads up once again. We are getting out of the distribution biz here at CanadianPreparedness.com. Use coupon code 20PREPPER to get 20% off store-wide. Everything must go. All right, 20% off store-wide. We're already starting to, run out of a lot of things. So I would encourage you to capitalize on whatever you can. I was in Cabela's last night trying to purchase a thing or two, if you know what I mean. And I noticed how high their prices are compared to ours in many respects. So if you want to get some deals, you get an additional 20% off. Use coupon code 20PREPPER and save yourself some money. I'll save myself the headache. I can free up more of my time to spend with the kids, to spend on the homestead, and to spend doing this right here, which is making videos. I realized yesterday that the day before that I had accidentally uploaded a daily update to the Canadian Prepper channel. I was being so good on that channel. I was being so Disneyland. I'm trying to do everything right so that they'll start, triggering the algorithm again, because for whatever reason, that channel was heavily shadow banned. You could see it from miles and miles away. Everybody I talk to, and I often hear this, right, that I'm shadow banned, and then you look a little deeper and you realize, no, the content just kind of sucks. Believe me, we have a team of people here. We're very self-critical. We bounce ideas off each other. We know if the content sucks or not. It doesn't suck. Maybe some of it sucks. It's good to be self-effacing to a certain degree, because that's how you improve. But clearly we're under the boot heel of some algorithmic forces, and I've talked to people at YouTube, and it's like talking to a wall. So I'm not sure what it is or what the reason is. I have my suspicions that maybe we were just we were getting a little too big for our britches at one point, and maybe it was something that I said that they started to get the sense that, well, maybe we can't trust this guy, that when the time comes, he is going to fall in line once again, right? And I'm very good at straddling that Overton window. I know where to go with things. But one thing I will say is this: if you see a podcast that just suddenly blows up for seemingly no reason, and it's just a guy talking to people, and the questions that they ask are mediocre, and you're wondering, how is this getting like millions of views all of a sudden? It's a safe bet that has been greenlit from the top down. There's 100%. Nothing like that happens on YouTube by accident. And I can tell you, I know where the ceiling is. I know who transcends the ceiling, and it's kind of around there's a certain amount of views. And I could do a whole, video on this, but there's a certain amount of views that if a person gets, it's almost like a threshold in which the powers that be get concerned that the sphere of influence is getting too big. And then they have to throttle them in the algorithm. And this was known long ago on YouTube. It was discovered that certain channels had a rating, and it was something that was embedded in the URL, actually. And people discovered this, and they're like, why are some channels B's and C's and A's and F's and all this? And so that was kind of a tip-off that indeed there are certain levels, and if you don't fit the cookie cutter description of what they expect you to do and say and things that are brand safe, then you're not going to get amplified. The other thing that they're doing right now, and I know I said I was going to wrap this up, but I wanted to say this because this is very important. They're stealing all the dissident content. Okay, so they're taking people who, interview people who are kind of on the fringe. You get those alternative perspectives to try to round things out. Not the crazy, nutty, alien, chemtrail stuff, but the real, geopolitical dissidents. What they're doing now is they have these AI channels take their content, and they've actually been doing this for a while, but now I think I see what's happening here, right? Because they don't want these creators to benefit from that content. So they've basically now allowed people to steal the content, transform it in a way that is just barely transforming it. Like, you have AI tools now that will slightly alter the sound wave, and it will cut out the background. And maybe what they do in all these videos is they cut out the interviewer. Okay, so you're just getting a compilation of the interviewee's statements. And just to give you, like an example, like, one of these former CIA guys who gets interviewed, right? And so what that does then is those channels that are purely AI driven, being run by, some account in India, the amount of views that those videos are starting to get is on par with the original video itself. So it kind of goes back to that whole reaction video fiasco where people were complaining that a lot of these big influencers were exploiting these smaller channels' content by reacting to a video. And if that's the first time you've seen that video, you're never going to go to the original content creator's video. So they were just making, mad amounts of money off of, and they still are, on essentially watching other people's content and adding no transformative value whatsoever. So it's very similar to that, only now it's totally AI driven. Now the real question is, the real conspiracy that I'm starting to wonder is, what if it's the case, and this is, I'm going out on a limb here, guys, all right? If you're YouTube and you control everything, and you could just make an AI account, steal someone's content, and keep 100% of the revenue to yourself, why wouldn't you do that? If you could just reroute the views, and it might even demoralize those people to stop producing content. Now, that's not what you want to do unless you want to control the narrative, because you know that we're heading into a period of austerity and global warfare. That's when you would want to kind of demoralize those people to stop creating and stop spreading that message, or in the very least hijack it and essentially what's the word I'm looking for, you'll be jacking into their potential, not only their reach, because those views will be rerouted elsewhere, but of course you'll be taking a large portion of what they would have earned on those videos. So I see this insidious movement happening towards AI generated content, and I can only wonder if it's intentional. I guess that's the thing. I realize there's a lot of opportunistic people who are playing the system. Google wants to maximize watch time and eyeballs. I think that's what it's about most of all. I don't think they would risk compromising their entire business model by stealing people's content. But you have to wonder why it's being permitted in the way that it is, because it's incredibly blatant. And the problem is, the more scary thing is the conformity. All the people who comment on these videos actually believe that those AI channels are the original content creators, all right? And it even gets worse when I look at some of the pure AI generated sludge and I see people, because here's what they do, all right? This is all you got to do. You go on ChatGPT, you say, hey, write me a script for a video, right? And you go and you put that video script into another program, which will generate you a bunch of imagery. You generate some AI audio, and there's programs that will put this all together. So it's literally, you can just churn out videos incredibly quickly. It takes a little bit of fine tuning, but above and beyond that, and the people who are watching these, you know, unknowing that you could simply ask AI and get a much more succinct and comprehensive, boiled down response, which is distilled to, you know, what you really just need to know and not all the fluff. A lot of this is just, you know, boilerplate stuff, and you can tell that it's purely AI generated content. It used to be that nobody watched this stuff because it was obvious that it was just sludge. Now I'm starting to see a lot, like some of these videos are getting thousands of likes. Sure, some of that is probably just, you know, bot farms, right? So you can buy likes, you can buy and do all that stuff. But YouTube is pretty good at cracking down on that aspect of things. So these are real people. And if that's the case, that people are already falling for it, and we've basically barely scratched the surface with AI capabilities, then I can imagine what it's going to be in a couple years. And so I have to wonder, you know, I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm not. I'm going to end it there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.